you?
I'm going to tell
Quieter than
you
I
what for
expected in here.
Huh?
That'll be more of a party atmosphere. Like every other
It
time
feels
I've
like
come.
somebody died.
Yeah, no, it's quiet. I'm surprised. It's usually such a party atmosphere when I get
Well, we haven't
here.
gotten started yet.
I know. I mean, just the audience
We told-
usually.
Stony, the road we trod, across the sands of time, through turbulent waves, from the bellies of beasts to underground railroads, migration from Selma bridges to Darfur highways, from streets where we march to beats that move us, from the fire of protest to the fire of celebration, of carnival, of junkanoo, of festival, anting anting. If we can't walk, we run. If we can't run, we fly. We make a way to make our way. From hashtags to hand drums, from live streams to living rooms, from Lagos streets to London blocks, to every corner we claim as home. Every step, a link. Every link, a lifeline. Everywhere we go, there we are, as we've always been. Stony.
Good afternoon, everyone. Man, y'all. Every time I say that, everybody sounds so sad. Yes, I'm gonna try it again. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
There we go. Welcome to ADAMA, the African Diaspora Art Museum of Atlanta. We're thrilled to have you here and thrilled to welcome you to the first ADAMA Arts Salon of our fall season. My name is Dr. Fahamu Pecou. I am the founder and executive director of ADAMA, and I'm joined today by two very distinguished scholars, artists, and very, very good friends. We're going to have a conversation about our current exhibition, Patacones, Paintbrushes, and Power. But before we do, I just want to take a moment to, say thank you to the ADAMA staff and team for all of our hard work in putting the exhibition together and today's event. Also have to give a big shout out to Aisha Hyman of Bodo Designs for this beautiful, beautiful chairs. You guys are now the first to experience ADAMA's new set for the ADAMA Arts Salon. Yes. We went shopping. But yes, we're thrilled to be here, to launch our fall season and our new fall campaign. Everywhere we go, there we are, which signifies the ways in which we, as people across the African diaspora, find home, find community within and amongst ourselves, wherever we are. And so we're really thrilled to be here, really thrilled to share these programs with you, and looking forward to today's conversation. You guys ready? Yes? All right, for sure. So for those of you who don't know, to my left here, this is Dr. Arturo Lindsay, Professor Emeritus of Art and Art History at Spelman College. Fantastic artist and my mentor. Also just, a really amazing scholar who has his entire career dedicated himself to elevating the African diaspora through his art, through his scholarship, and in many, many other ways, and also building community. He has been an example for me personally and for many, many others, including this lovely young lady to my right here, Dr. Renée Alexander Craft, who is a professor of performance studies at UNC Chapel Hill. Yes, and that too. Yes, yeah. She does a little bit of that communication stuff. She knows how to talk. But we are here today to talk about this current exhibition, as mentioned before. And before we go into it, I do want to just kind of use this as an opportunity to ask Arturo, one, to kind of paint a picture of us, of the ways in which your role in co-founding the Taller Portobelo Artist Collective led sitting around a table in Panama. But I'd like for you to share that story of how the Taller Collective began.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you guys. Is this working? Can you guys hear me okay? More or less. Is this any better? Hey, I can hear me. All right. Ironically, right now I'm working on a book. It's about the aesthetics of Taller Portobelo. It's called Congo Art and Aesthetics and Visual Culture of Taller Portobelo. And so I'm trying to get the origin story, putting it together as well as I can. And I come to realize that that's almost a losing battle, because every work or every art movement that I know of, just sort of evolved. Things, came in bits and pieces. There's only one art movement, that's Dada, that started in 1916 at Café Voltaire. You could pinpoint that. But other than that, it's out there. And so this is an evolution story. So if I take a couple of minutes, I'll let you know and tell you about it. For me, going to Portobelo was really going home, going back to Panama. And it happened right around, right after the United States invaded Panama. And I called my prima, I called my cousin. I said, Linda, ¿cómo está mi Panama? Linda, how's my Panama? And she said, Arturo, el Panama que tú conoces ya no existe. Panama that I know no longer exists. I was in a panic, hearing that. What is the Panama that I know? And certainly, part of that culture, part of the Panama I know as a kid was Congo Carnival, and it had to do with partying during carnival season, right? And I had just finished doing a book on Santeria aesthetics. I figured, okay, so I'm looking at the and focusing a lot in Cuba, looking at the Yoruba tradition. Why not focus on the Congo tradition? And so that's where it began. At least the thinking, I needed to come back home and see what I can do. But the thing that affected me also was that a lot of people walk up to me, very sympathetic, say, Arturo, I'm really sorry to hear what's happening at the United States invaded Panama, But a question that really used to freak me out was that, are there any black people in Panama? And I was like, damn, so beside my family, But I began to realize that people in the United States did not know Panamanians. And if you don't know somebody, you could kill them easily. And I figured I can't sit back and watch this thing happen again. All right. So I started thinking of ways of coming back home. So that's where it started, for me at least. And so I ended up getting a Lila Wallace grant that had me down in Panama for a year. And that's when I met Janeka and I met Sandra. The Lila Wallace grant was wonderful in that it, for me, 2 people to Atlanta. So I brought them to Sandra and Janeka to Spelman College in my painting workshop, in my painting studio. I had Janeka showing people how he built bastones. And the wonderful thing about art, is art is an international language. Some of my students did not understand a word he was saying in Spanish, and not that Janeka spoke much. He's a personality, and the people that are laughing are the people that know him and know him well, And so we also had Sandra come up, and there was a quilt making workshop, and I can't think of the name of the community, but anyway, here in Atlanta, an old black community, and Sandra went there with her camera just shooting, and so this became a way in which that we started that going. While they were here, we started talking about how Sandra raised the question. She says, "What's going to happen after we're gone?" And so the vulnerability, of the human, became really very, apparent. So if we're doing anything that's important, we need to make sure that it lasts. So my thought is that you need to institutionalize it. Much as I hate institutions, you need to put this thing together. And so that's how, things got going. Came back down to Portobelo. The guys came out to paint for various reasons. And if you see the film, at the Congo, that the reason that Tito went out was a bunch of women, were there, But anyway, that became a ways in which, Panamanians and U.S. Americans, were meeting with each other, You know, they would go out for a beer, they go hang out on the street, you know, and they find ways of talking. And I know I'm getting long, but let me just tell this little piece here. One of the things that when Renee came, you know, she talked about the fact that she didn't speak Spanish at the time, but she spoke wave and she spoke smile. And that's how she was, you know, people were responding back to her. And she just became, you know, a darling, especially to the women. And I remember one time walking down that street with Renee, and some women came up and snatched her. You know, I'm going, damn, what the hell's going on? So we're getting ready to go work on some dresses, and we're going to show Renee. I said, okay, I'll come along, because that's what I was doing. I was walking, I was translating for her. So they stopped and looked at me and said, ¿A dónde tú vas? You know, where are you going? I said, con Renee. You know, ella no habla español. You know, she doesn't speak Spanish. I'm going to translate. That's okay. We'll understand her. She'll understand me. Next thing I know, Renee throws her hand on her hip and give me that you know, black woman, you know. Okay. So I went back. The other time, this is the last piece I gotta, you know, the other time, because this speaks, you know, and you're a perfect example. So is Tosha. So is Oronike. So all the people that have gone down there, you know, in terms of you know, becoming part of the culture, you know, of Portobelo. And people not getting caught up on that notion of, I can't speak Spanish. I got failing grades in Spanish. You know, the hell with that. You know, if you got to go to the bathroom, you're going to learn how to say, I got to go to the bathroom. You know, if you're hungry, you're going to say that. And that's the beginning. But what happened is when people appeared in the village, you know, Amy Sherrill talks about this. She's talking about looking at people that look like relatives of hers, you know, but they didn't. Well, Amy spoke her own Spanish, but you know what they got. But long story short, I wrote a letter of recommendation to a Fulbright, you know, for Renee. And one day I'm in my office, and she actually won it. One day I'm in my office, phone rings, and it's Renee. Say, hola, papi, ¿cómo estás? Say, estoy bien, you know. Say, hey, papi, how are you? Estoy bien. So it's hey, Renee. So chévere. So we end up having a half an hour conversation, and then I hung up. I went, Dios mío, we only spoke in Spanish. At not one moment did we speak English. But what happened is that Renee's interest, you know, in the people, you know, Renee's interest in learning to have that communication. And at that point, you know, I began to feel this is beginning to work, you know. So that's it. Let me stop right there.
Oh no, thank you for that. That's a you know, beautiful origin story, and it makes me also think about you know, when we talk about diaspora, we typically think about diaspora in terms of the different countries or cities, you know, where people come from. But the world that you were able to create through this program sparked a kind of diaspora that extended beyond these, you know, geographic locations, but also became a diaspora of universities and communities, right? Like, so, you know, I became familiar with the Taller Portobelo Summer Art Colony because I took classes with you at Spelman, and you were taking Spelman students down. But Renee didn't attend Spelman and ended up being one of the Portobeleños, right? So I'd love for you to talk about how you, your origin story with the art colony.
So I'm taking a moment because, of course, you asked me this after. Can you all hear me just fine? Yeah. You asked me this after Poppy makes me weepy. So now I'm like, okay, get it back together. Get it back together. So I have been at UNC, Chapel Hill, in a master's program. And I was really fascinated with what do we mean when we say someone is acting Black? This was in like the early, kind of the mid 90s. When we say somebody is and isn't acting Black, what are we really trying to say? So I was interested in how performance studies scholarship might answer that question, might give us a way to understand that. And I was looking at the work of Adrian Piper, who is a visual artist, philosopher. And I ended up meeting one of Arturo's students, Michelle Lanier. Michelle Lanier and I were the first student fellows at the Institute of African American Research, which had just started at UNC Chapel Hill. And our job was really programming for the Institute. Michelle had been a Spelman graduate, and she had been among the first group of students, she'd been in the first group of students to go down to the Spelman College Summer Art Colony. And so when we met and we started talking, she said, oh, you got to go to Portobelo. You need to go to Portobelo. You need to meet, Papi Arturo. You need to meet Arturo. And I thought, okay. I was intrigued, but in that way you say okay to something that sounds good, but you don't yet know whether or not you're going to do it. And then she also said we need to bring Arturo up to the Institute to present. Arturo came and he was presenting on the work that he had done with Delilah Wallace. And I think that work was both Black Christ, there were images of Black Christ, and there were images of the Congos in Portobelo, and just kind of people in their everyday lives. And I was one of those students at the time who I had in my undergraduate studies and in my master's studies been studying Blackness in the Americas. And when I saw Arturo's images, I was pissed. I was really angry because in all of my effort to try to study Blackness in the Americas, nobody ever mentioned Panama. So I didn't know. And I'm seeing people who look like what, my husband and his family often call people from down east, North Carolina. They could be from coastal communities in North Carolina. They could be my cousins, my siblings, my friends in the US. And at the time, FUBU was really big. As a brand. And so I'm seeing folks who look like me in FUBU and, the fashion I'm used to seeing, but they're Panamanian, right? And so now I really want to go. I want to know more about what this is. And I have two ways that I often answer that question. Both of them are true. The one I'm going to tell you first is the truest, which is I'm going to try to do this and not cry. I saw you do that presentation and something struck in me like a match. And I really just thought, I have to go. I just have to. I have to see it for myself. And I remember coming up to you after your presentation and I said, I'm a poet. You have this artist colony. If you need me to go down as a poet, I'll go down as a poet. I'm applying to grad school. I'm not in grad school yet, but if you need me to go down as an ethnographer, I was still figuring out what that was, mind you. But if you needed me to go down as an ethnographer, I was going to go down as that. I just wanted to go. And so when I went the first time, all that I knew is that Turquoise Dyson had been down to the artist retreat with you before, and it told me a bit about it. And Turquoise Dyson's mother is my mentor, just like you became my mentor. Her mother's Disoyini Madison. And so I had heard about Portobelo from Turquoise. I had heard about Portobelo now from Michelle. I prepared, and I met Orenike Odeleye in the airport in Atlanta. On her way down to the artist colony. So we were all down there together for the first time. And walking the streets, talking to the people, something just called to me. I felt this at homeness and this curiosity that I couldn't imagine being quenched anytime soon. So I went and then I kept going, kept going back and forth. And the other little bit I'll say to that, when I got the Fulbright and I went down. So when I went down, I didn't know I knew I was going to apply for a doctorate. And I'm going to just be completely honest. I am from North Carolina. I had lived in New York and I got cold. I told myself I am never living in another cold place for my whole entire life. So when my mentor, Disoyini Madison, tried to send me to Northwestern, to Chicago, I thought, no, ma'am, not doing it. She tricked me. She had me go in the summertime. I was like, oh, this is fabulous. This is wonderful. It's great. So when I was thinking about my research project, one, I was called and pulled into it anyway. It did not hurt that it meant I would need to be in a tropical space in February for several years. That did not hurt at all either. But yeah, I went and I just I got hooked. And the last little story I'll tell is when my mother and my father came to visit during the Fulbright in 2003. And am I right, Mom? This was your first passport? Yeah, it was my mom's first passport. And I had been on them forever. You should come down. And when they finally did, I'd been down since since January of 2003. My parents came to visit me. I want to say in August. So I had been on them for a while to come. And one of my favorite memories is when my mother stood on the balcony at Sandra's house. And my mother, grew up in Charlotte. And she said, I know now why you love this place. And I asked her why. And she said, it reminds me of the Charlotte of my youth. And what she meant by that is my mom grew up in segregated Charlotte and neighborhoods where people were looking out for each other. So you could have children running up and down the streets because there were going to be aunts, uncles, cousins looking out for them. People who greet you in the street. You got heavy packages. Somebody's going to ask, can I carry that for you? Can I help you? And so it has become one of the homes in this world in every kind of way.
Thank you for that. Now I'm weepy. A part of the reason that I wanted to start with, these sort of personal anecdotes about, about Portobelo in your experience there is because I want to paint for the audience an image of how magical of a place that it is. And for anyone who has gone, you know exactly what I mean when, the running joke was if you drink the water in Portobelo, you are forever changed. Right. And it's quite literally true. Like anyone who has gone there, anyone who has participated in this program, there's such fond, powerful memories of community and connection and food and cerveza and dancing and salsa and Congo and all these kinds of things that it's really hard to put into words. But I think you guys did a beautiful job in doing so. And you can see some of that in the exhibition as well. And so I'd like to shift us now to go into a little bit more of the sort of academic side of things, because both of you have my personal story. Anybody came here to hear me, they came here, y'all.
Fahamu Pecou, what is your personal story?
My personal,
about
okay. So I'll be brief with mine, as brief as possible. But no, so like I said before, I first heard about Portobelo in the art colony from Arturo when I was a student of his in his painting class at Spelman, and he had been trying to convince me to go. And going to Portobelo, he might as well have been inviting me to go to Mars. Like, how am I going to get there? I don't have the money for that. But as fate would have it, after I graduated, Arturo was going to be representing the Taller Collective at a festival in Spain, and he asked me to come along with him to, help assist with doing this installation. Before we were supposed to leave, unfortunate events meant Arturo was not able to go, so I had to go on my own and represent the Taller, who I'd never met. And I got there, we had designed the installation and everything. I got everything set up as we designed it. And I met some of the guys from the collective who were on that trip and other folks from Panama who were on that trip. And we just had a really good time. Afterwards, Arturo was like, now everybody really wants to meet you. You really have to come. And so I ended up going in February. I think this was 2001 or 2002, somewhere in there. I ended up going and what I did not mention is that my father is also from Panama. My father's from Colón, and I'd never been to Panama before. And so that was also, it was also a really, kind of a homecoming moment for me to go to Panama for this first time. But arriving in Portobelo was like nothing I could have ever anticipated. Like Renee was saying, walking down the street, it's like, that's my cousin, right. That's my aunt. Who made this fried chicken? Because that's like my grandmother used to make, you know what I mean? And it was just a real like kind of homecoming experience in a number of ways, but it also became the seed that quite literally led to ADAMA, right? Being there for that, on that trip, planted a seed in my mind of this idea of diaspora. I was able to touch it, right? I was able to see it. I was able to taste it. I was able to feel it. I was able to dance with it. And it was, it stayed with me, and it led to this idea of ADAMA. I really wanted to create a space where we can still have that kind of community through art, through culture, and through our shared experiences. And so that's my story. Yeah. And I also met Orenike on that first trip. So I was saying that I wanted to shift us into some of the more sort of academic underpinnings of both of your practice, right? Because I think it's also important for us to talk about the ways in which the legacy of the Congo traditions, the history, of the Cimarrones, and what that means, and how that ultimately leads into this dynamic, creative, artistic practice that's not just the performance of carnival, but it also lives in these paintings. It lives in the poetry. It lives in the music. And this is for either of you. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more, because you both have way more experience in the sort of historiography of Portobelo and how it came into being. So we'd love for you to talk a little bit about the history of Portobelo specifically and the Cimarron community there.
So one of the things that makes Portobelo unique is Portobelo was kind of the jewel of the Spanish crown and the Spanish Empire. That means that ships that were coming from other parts of, the Americas end up stopping in Portobelo. There's a customs house, the aduana, where gold and silver from other parts of the Americas were coming, but also human cargo. There is because there was enslavement in Panama, the enslaved who self-liberated, who ran away to the hills and rainforests, were called Cimarrones, formed their own communities, were able to kind of honor their own culture and honor their relationship with the pirates. These are, I should say English privateers, who were also against the Spanish. And one of the early sayings that Arturo often talked about is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so these are self-liberated Black people who made alliances with the pirates and privateers to secure their own freedom. So if those pirates and privateers were battling the Spanish, then those were going to be their people to get down with. Right. And so, the Congo tradition helps honor that history. The tradition includes a drama, and within that drama, part of the story that's told around carnival season is that story of liberation, is that story of kind of turning some of colonialism and colonization in that way on its head. And I'll take a pause just to see if you want to jump in there with me.
I was getting ready to take notes. They agreed, and very much the historical, lineage, that occurred in Portobelo. While people refer to it as the jewel in the crown, I really think of it, as the Wall Street of the colonial era, because the ships that Renee is talking about, coming from Europe to the colonies, stopped in Panama, rather stopped in Portobelo, when they were selling goods, whatever kind of goods they were selling. The gold and silver that was being robbed by the Incas in particular, in Peru, was coming first to Panama City, then crossed over the isthmus. Panama is the thinnest country. I mean, thinnest landmass, between the two major oceans, and so the enslaved people would be bringing the gold and the silver, over to the Caribbean side, to Portobelo, and kept in the aduana. There was a lot more silver than it was gold, because in South America there was a lot more of that, and very true. The Africans were brought, enslaved Africans were stopped in a couple of places before getting to Portobelo. But what I'd like to mention, since we're talking about cross-cultural stuff also, when I look at when I'm doing the origin stories also about the carnival, and the ways in which in Portobelo we celebrate carnival as opposed to in the other places, the focus is really on the notion of that liberation, and also when I look at the various ethnic groups that arrived in Portobelo, many of them, crossing over the isthmus and going to Panama, but then many of them escaped, and if you're a Yoruba, let's say, and you're planning an escape, and you speak to let's say you're a Yoruba man, and you speak to a Yoruba woman and say, listen, I'm leaving tonight, are you going to come with me? And the woman says, no, and an Igbo woman is standing next and say, I'll go, you're going with that Igbo woman, And so what happens is that the palenques, which was the houses that they built, the areas that the fortified villages that they built, then had this cross pollination, because you had folk that were probably fight each other, on the homeland, were banding together, in the palenques, and in order to protect themselves, also, what they did, and this comes down into the carnival that we play, the game that we play, the juego de Congo, the Congo ritual play. You'd have what was called a palenque arriba, which means that the palenque above. So what would happen is they'll create a palenque arriba and a palenque abajo. The palenque abajo would have the warriors, men and young boys and young girls, either because it's about liberation. But there was an important character called pajarito. Pajarito means little bird. And what pajarito would do, any of you have walked in a forest, not only a rainforest, if you stop and maintain silence, you're going to hear the rainforest, so you hear the woods be very quiet. But then after a while, you'll hear a bird start chirping, and you hear something else, because the little animals that are in the there, they freeze when they see a human coming through, right? But then they start making noise, or rather, they start making noise when they see the human coming through, to warn everybody else. So the idea of that bird, making a noise, saying that somebody is coming, is probably the enslavers are coming to recapture. So Pajarito, the sentry, would head on up to the Palenque Arriba, where the queen and the women, the pregnant women, and the children and the ancianos, the elderly, were kept, and tell them to run, okay? And then the warriors come back down, and at that point you have the struggle between the cimarrones and the warrior, I'm sorry, and the cimarrones and the Spaniards, okay, the enslavers. Basically, bringing that into the festival, how the festival is created. Even there's some places, and not in Portobelo, but in some places, they even have the pirates, become part of the Juego de Congo. So you see that there are various communities, now throughout Panama, though they celebrate the same kind of congada, the same dates and all that kind of stuff. There's some minor differences that you'll find, which are cultural differences. So what you have in Panama is what I refer to in my scholarship is mestizaje africana, an African mixture, of folk. And they, of course, collaborated with the indigenous people as well. So the Guna people of the Guna Islands, and on the mainland, they collaborated with the pirates, and they would meet the Spaniards. I mean, I'm sorry, not the Spanish, the British, the English, in their ships before coming into Portobelo, and give them the news. They have this, that, so much gold and silver, because, the Africans had to bring it over. They'll tell the indigenous, folk, that's it. One last piece I need to mention here that's notable, is that oh God, I can't think of his name now, the pirate that circumvented the world. Drake. Who said that? On point. Thank you. Thanks, Danny B. Could always count on Danny B. Okay. The Pedro Pietri, not Pedro, that's a poet. Pedro Prieto was an enslaved African that was collaborating, with the English, and ended up, on Drake's boat, and became a co-pilot. So the first African to circumvent the globe is a Panamanian.
How about it?
I bet she's from Colon.
So I love getting this context, because I'm also thinking about, and this question is for you, Renee, more specifically, given your work and research around the performance of the Juego Congo. Even in my own travels in different places across the diaspora, I've come into contact with many communities that refer to themselves as Congo, right? Even, across different Caribbean islands, you find very similar performances in terms of the dance performances and the costuming, right? Like, so for example, like in Martinique, they do, the Congo dance where you cross your legs, right? Like they do that same dance and the women have the skirts, you know what I mean? And so I'm curious if you, across your research, have come into information around those connections and particularly, again, how they relate to Portobello and Panama.
Yeah, I think the easiest answer is that the former Congo kingdoms, which we often see spelled as the Key Congo kingdoms with a K, in Africa were enormous. And people from those spaces ended up all over the Caribbean, in different parts of the Americas, and the body remembers. So as we're passing down traditions, we're passing down those movements, those songs, those dances, and they both hold on to some of the African retentions, but also kind of remix depending on where they are. And so some of the culture that exists on the ground where African descendant people found themselves was mixed in, but you still see these relationships between various peoples who are likely descended from the Kikongo kingdom.
How do I want to ask this? Like, I think that what I love about that is, like you said, the body remembers, right? And there's so much language, when we talk about African people and the traumas of enslavement and all these things, that create these sort of borders and lines, this person is this and this person is that. But ultimately, we see through these kinds of performances and cultural expressions that, it's all us, regardless of what you call it, right? It's still us. In your work with the performances, and again, with specifically with the Cimarrones in the Congo and in Panama, what have you uncovered that surprised you about that?
I'm going to mention a couple of things. One is historical, and it kind of, we talked a little bit about colonial times, but one of the things that I wanted to get to say about, in terms of surprising, it should not have, but I'll be honest, I was not a person who was all that interested in U.S. history as a high school student, as a college student, because in my experience, especially U.S. history, because the U.S. history that I was given in school were mainly dead white men. And a lot of the history I was consuming just didn't feel like it had anything positive that reflected me. Whereas the stories that my mother was giving me, the stories I was getting in my community about the Depression, about different segregation, about the Civil Rights Movement, about all of these different moments in time, had people who looked like me at the center of it. So I was interested in stories. I was interested in hearing people's oral histories in that way, but I wasn't as interested in written history because I hadn't yet had a good history teacher. And I hadn't yet had someone decenter a master narrative that didn't have the labor of African descendant people at the center of the U.S. story, which it ought to be. And so researching Panama helped me understand U.S. history better and sparked an interest in U.S. history, because there's no way to understand contemporary U.S. history without understanding Panama and its relationship to Panama. There's no way of understanding the contemporary U.S. without understanding what the acquisition of the Panama Canal, what that meant in a U.S. Colonizing, way in terms of establishing the U.S. as a superpower in that moment. Because at the time at the dawn of the 20th century, you were having military might moved by boats more than planes. And I had read aspects of this, but couldn't imagine it yet until I started understanding Panama. I didn't think about the fact that, late 1800s, early 20th century, you're not just going to drive across the U.S. right? Because the infrastructure didn't exist to do so. And part of that, you know, in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, is straight wilderness in between, and different communities of indigenous people, different populations, but the infrastructure wasn't there to get from one space to another. So when the California Gold Rush happens, if you were going to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, you were going to go through Panama. You were going to go from New York. You might take a boat to Panama, have somebody walk that boat or get another boat on the other side of Panama to take it to the US, or you were going to take the Panama Railroad across to get there. But there was no way to experience that easily without the existence of the Panama Canal. So now all of a sudden I'm interested in, okay, well, what did these presidents hope to gain? What was their interest? What was the U.S. Policy and military interest in Panama? What was the U.S., you know, so that sparked my interest in that way too, and getting a sense of it. Beyond that, one of the best pieces, I'll say what I witnessed from my perspective as a U.S. born Southern Black woman the first time I went to Panama, and a really great caution you gave me when I started doing the research. When I went, the question I had first was, so what is the Congo tradition, and what does Blackness mean? No, I didn't yet have that Blackness question. It was, what's the Congo tradition and what does it mean? As simple as that. Coming out of it, seeing the power of women in Portobello, and the strength of the Congo Queen, it was, what is the Congo Queen and the strength of women in this tradition, and how does that kind of translate into the meaning of the town and what this means for the town? What I think I took for granted the Blackness I was witnessing. So I took for granted the Blackness I was seeing was the Blackness I already knew. And the best advice you gave me, we were there for May is, you know, the time to celebrate. What started as a week of kind of Black history at Etnia Negra, started as a day, you know, the El Día de la Etnia Negra, that went into a week that became kind of celebrating the month of May. We were there one May and watching school children march in celebration of Black ethnicity in Panama. And they had signs that said things like better representation in textbooks, you know, all these other things. And I was filming it and witnessing it, but still understanding it from my lens of Blackness. And Arturo was great about going, be careful and calling people Black, you know, just thinking that what you're seeing is Black as you know it. The trajectory of Blackness here may be different, is different than what you are imagining for a U.S. trajectory of Blackness. And that made me go to do the work to figure out what Blackness meant, how it came to mean and matter there, so that by the time people are claiming, there are people who I witness as Black who would claim Black ethnicity. There are people I witness and I might have interpreted as Black who might, you know, claim more, you know, mestiza history, or might claim a different category that wasn't quite that. So you made me slow down. You made me understand, and this is when I got interested in the policies that make Blackness what they are, right? So those policies shift and change without the culture of the people shifting and changing radically, and those policies mean where you can go and where you can't go, what you can't do and what you can do. And it made me interested in what splintered Blackness in Panama in terms of a West Indian, you know, trajectory of Blackness versus, you know, people who came during enslavement. And people who came during enslavement would have entered the 20th century as Spanish-speaking, largely Catholic Panamanians, and people who came as English-speaking, largely English-speaking Protestant people who were imagining home elsewhere and were coming to labor on the Panama Canal, and the ways in which policies pit them against each other. So that's probably what I learned more than anything.
Well, can I add something to this, though? But the other part, too, you know, it had a lot to do with a perspective, because many Caribbean people, many West Indian people, my family in particular, you know, the people that migrated to Panama migrated with the notion that they were going to return back home.
Right.
They were coming. There were no jobs on home on your island, so somebody's offered to pay your way bring you to this new country, give you a job, and give you a ticket to go back home. Okay, so a lot of people, because the expression I'm a subject of the Queen. You know, you heard it a lot coming out of Jamaicans, saying it, Trinidadians, etc. They so that created those other kinds of frictions. Mesta la Ethnia Negra, I believe, is doing a lot more to assuage some of those things, and again, my interest in building bridges, cross-cultural bridges, shows up.
Thank you. I'm looking at the time, and man, it's flying by. I had like 5 other questions that I wanted to ask, but I'm going to ask Arturo this one question, and we'll open it up to the room. So, again, we're here celebrating this exhibition, which, at its heart is in many ways a tribute to the work that you did and the door that you opened to so many of us to have this amazing experience with Panama, with Portobelo specifically, and out of what the Taller Portobelo original artists of the art collective, and then ultimately through the art colony, an aesthetic language, was really kind of developed out of that. And I'd love for you to kind of speak to some of that symbolism and iconography in that work, and the ways in which it has influenced and informed and shaped so many artists' perspective who have had contact with that group.
Thanks, Tom. It's a great question, and I almost wish I was in the gallery because I'd be able to point things out. But let me try the best as I can. When you'll see the devil appears a lot in paintings, and for the Bible Belt in the United States, that's Satan. And I ain't gonna have no Satan in my house. Well, understanding the iconography and understanding the meanings, the devil represents the enslavers, the Spanish enslavers that enslaved the African people. When you look at the eyes, before that, something that Renee was saying, and I wanted to back up on that. You're going to see a lot of women, a lot of beautiful women looking directly in your face. And that goes back to the notion of the woman-centric, community, and the woman-centric, the queen-centric organization. When I was talking about the running away, when the people were running up into the hills, the queens were up there, the mothers were up there, and it was the idea that if you kill a man, you kill a man. If you capture a man, you capture a man, one man. If you capture a woman, you can capture a whole culture. Okay, because the women are the ones that pass the culture down more specifically, and so it became the center, to go after. So the eyes, there was a time when you look at this is good. When you get in there's a big painting of Bayano. Bayano was one of the Cimarrones, one of the kings of the Cimarrones. He had a huge, army that included a bunch of indigenous people, a bunch of gunas, where they are following, Bayano. But you notice the eyes are a little larger. Okay, at that time, and that painting showed up in my exhibition, terminating, ending my residency in Panama at the contemporary art museum, and I was trying to idealize some things. I was trying to work on some things that will push a little bit beyond. Because at one point I was a photorealist, and I was really trying to get away from that. But see, when you look at the eyes, they're a little bit larger than what it would be. And they're staring directly at you. And I began to realize later that this is the way that Taller really worked. Unfortunately, a lot of people were calling them self-taught painters. Well, they didn't have any academic training per se, but what I refer to as workshop trained. So if I'm standing next to you on my canvas and I'm working on big eyes, it is within the realm of possibility that big eyes will show up in yours. And I can show you, oh, good, man, this is wonderful. Oh, I'm sorry. I get a little excited talking about my work sometimes. When you see, no, often I don't. That's the other part. Because that stuff is hard. you know, people think about, oh, it's so nice to be an artist. Oh, the hell with that. You know, that's hard ass work. I mean, when you finally finish it and you sign the damn thing, it's like, okay, you walk out the studio. But anyway, if you look at the Retrato de mi Ángel Guardián, Portrait of my Guardian Angel, you see the chest, you see those little juju packs that are there. You know, the fabric, the not fabric, what do you call it? The material, that holds the little something that's in it, and there are love poems in there. I tell you, don't open them. um, but that is, I'm taking it. It's the same. Well, first of all, the idea of the guardian angel comes straight out of Congo tradition, because when you have the Juego de Congo, the guardian angel leads the other angels as they capture the evil and bless the evil and send him on his way. And so that's in that painting. So when you look at the Congo paintings, you look at my paintings, and even in Sandra's photography, what Sandra is doing is actually capturing moments, of Congo culture, of culture in Portobelo, as a whole. So I need to stop there. So if anyone has any questions, just so that we open up to that while I'm in the gallery, I could probably point out specific things. Okay.
Yes. So we're going to open it up for questions. There'll be a mic that gets passed around, and we'll take a couple questions.
My question is, why did you build a museum?
Oh, that's a great question.
What was the question?
Why did you build a museum?
Oh.
I built a museum for you, Miss Wendy. I wanted you to have a place where you could come and you could see art that looks like you and that shows you a world that you might not have even imagined before. Yeah.
Good answer.
Great question.
Good question. Good answer.
Hi, I'm Angie Ray. You guys probably already met me several times. I have a question regarding the pointillism that is being used in Congo. It's funny because before I was even exposed to the Congo art, as an artist, I am infatuated. It came out of me from mi alma. And seeing it represented in this exhibition really, you guys probably wondering like, well, she's on 10 all the time. It's because it's like I'm seeing something that I resonate with. So I wanted to know through your research, did pointillism just comes, organically, or is that something that they saw from another artist and then they translated it in their own? Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, and thanks a lot for asking that as well. I would refer to it much as more as dot patterns as opposed to pointillism, because if we're talking about pointillism, that's an art movement, at the beginning of the 20th century. And what you're doing is you look at these dot patterns, to paint a man and paint a woman, etc. What I was looking for in my paintings was to show the energy that was coming out of the angel or whatever it is that I was painting, and bottom line, was the ashe, the life force, the energy. And those I see, I have, former students in the room. I know they get tired of me talking about ashe, but it was about that energy. How did he depict that energy? And so I thought that by, if you're taking it and moving it outside of the figure that you're painting, then you make a reference to that, so it becomes part of the iconography. That's done. Okay.
As we were seeing, the art from artists who attended the art colony, could speak to the founding of the Summer Art Colony, how that came about, and then the entire context for what it is.
Well, I should have you speak on it. You did from the beginning as well. So tell me again, what is it that you want? Wait, you weren't here before when I went through all of that? So you want me to tell you again? That people won't get bored, they're going to walk out. See what I had to put up with? All right, very very quickly, Odo. As you may have heard the story, before, but I'll go through it again. One of the major issues. Let me just take a piece of it, which really fits well with you. One of the major issues that I was looking for is to build cultural bridges, on two-way street, so that Congos could come to Atlanta, and Atlanta-based artists, could go to Portobelo, and by building those bridges, you begin to create opportunities for harmony, amongst the people. Because one of the questions after when the United States invaded Panama, and which is what I mentioned earlier, is that I it really bothered me when people came up, to me and asking. Well, first of all, they were always very kind. So sorry to hear, what happened to Panama. I hope none of your family were injured. All the nice kinds of things, but almost like always an ending. Are there any black people in Panama? I was like, damn. But that annoyed me on a couple of levels. I mean, Panama got invaded. If they were black or not black, it was Panama that got invaded. It was my homeland. But nevertheless, coming to it, I was looking for a way in which to bring people together. And so if we created that bridge that could go back and forth, it would happen. When you came, you were a blessing, because you spoke Spanish, and you weren't shy, obviously, right? I can rank on her now, can't I? I got the mic. But anyway, Odo, and I was telling Tony this morning, and one of the things that you and Renee, what you guys did, and for those of you that they refer to me as Papi, at times, right? Papi Duro, it's because we had created a fellowship, an ahijada fellowship, a goddaughter ahijado, fellowship, because I had no money. Okay, and we're trying to keep the fares very short. Tosha was also one of the ahijadas. I don't know if anybody else is here or I'm not seeing it. But what you guys did, which bless your heart, because I'm trying to run this damn program, curate exhibitions at Spelman, teach art history, they work you like a slave, you know. So I'm doing all of that stuff, and Otto and Renee, would look at what needed to be done, when we come to Portobelo. I said, Papi, we will go ahead, and we'll go shopping, you know. And so they will fly down, and get with the cook, and then they get they'll fly down 2 or 3 days ahead, or maybe even more. I know they didn't need all that time, but nevertheless, they were volunteering that time, right? So you will bother somebody when they volunteering, and on top of which they had to pay their own, airfare to come down, right? But one thing I always insisted on, I didn't want anybody to have to pay, for a program or pay for anything if you're volunteering. The fact that we needed you would damn sure help. So when I arrived with the crew, with the students, the food was already there, and what's her name, the cook? No, for Doña Ceci and Soledad, right? In the early years with Doña Ceci, oh man, Doña Ceci was a cook, and he proposed to her.
multiple times.
So everything would be there, everything would be all laid out. So I mean, that made such a difference. I didn't have to think about that. I didn't have to worry about it. It was off my plate. But and then when you and with no, yeah. Well, Nadia showed up later and fell in love with a woman. Next thing I know, they got married and there's some kids coming. Then you're a godmother, to somebody, and seeing that it became family. I sat back and went, Dios mío, this thing is working. It's a hell of a thing when you. Like, I'm glad Oscar is here because Oscar, comes up with like a great idea, and then finally see the daggone thing. I'm not saying that the art colony was in anywhere in the neighborhood of the stuff that Oscar built, but just to see an idea become a reality, it's sweet. And God bless you, baby. And I thank you, and I thank you, Tosha, Faminsky, Renee. I don't want to miss anybody. Everybody that had that been on the trip, because I damn sure did not do this alone. It took people like you. And the thing that would amaze me is that we're sitting down in Portobelo, and you guys, you and this guy over here, having a beer and you're chatting and laughing with each other. And I said, how long have you guys known each other? A week. But you've been in Panama a week. Yeah, that's where we met. So the fact that you guys were in the States, and had a common interest, and ends up in Portobelo, and bought it, and then you ended up working in this business that he was trying to pull together. It
Let me
became
correct
family.
that. She ran the business.
That is true. And if I came and stayed too long, she'd run me out of the business. Anyway, I hope I answered your question. Yes, dear.
I think we can do one more question, so I'll take your question right here.
Thank you guys for sharing your story and sharing your expression with us. Question for both of you. Are there any other colonies? We talk about building bridges. Have you visited any other colonies that had such an impact on you and it had an impact on your expression and influenced the work that you create?
That's a great question. I'm going to turn that to you because I kept going back to Portobelo for 25 years. So I really like that one. I'll try another one at some point.
My greatest experience was at Bellagio in Italy. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And it's a beautiful villa. And ironically, I chose to take that time period, at Bellagio to do some work with AI, not artificial intelligence. Yeah. No. Before leaving, I wanted to do some images on the computer, right? And try different programs. And so before leaving, I had a crash course with Fahamu, and with Dan Shelley, and so I get
Adobe Illustrator.
Yeah, there you go. So what you all wait so damn long to tell me this?
It was more fun. It was more fun.
I'm just a bongo boy from Cologne, Anyway, Adobe. But anyway, so here I'm in this wonderful, fabulous villa, in Bellagio, Italy, but I was able to have contact with Dan if I was having a problem, with Illustrator, or with Fahamu, and it was really great, and you get up in the morning and you go up to you brush your teeth, hopefully, and you go up to breakfast. But when you come back, the room is all cleaned up and everything is organized. And I had a little studio space. So I go in the studio and I start working like from 8:30. 12:30, I go up and I get something to eat, and then come back down again and work all into the afternoon. So it was like 8 hours a day, I was working, just free, and I didn't have the phone ringing all the damn time, etc. I got another residency coming up in Hermitage, in Florida. I'm looking forward to disconnect, so that I can do my stuff.
Thank you. So before we conclude, I just want to share a little bit of a story that Arturo brilliantly paints in his film Art de Congo. That talks about the Juego de Congo, the Congo play, and the performance and ritual that you see during the Congo Carnival. So it starts out with the Diablos, the devils, chasing people around with whips and literally like whipping people and chasing you through the streets. And the Congos are there trying to distract and pull away. And then ultimately the Animas, the guardian angels, come out. And by the end of the event, they've captured all the devils. And instead of killing them, instead of destroying them, they remove their masks and they turn them back into human beings. And so, Yes, they bless them. They bless them, and they and it heals the community, right? And so this is a really wonderful way, I think, to think about the magic of all of this that we've been talking about today, and this experience of Taller Portobelo is the way in which love permeates everything, right?
Yes.
So even through this trauma, even through all of the drama, like at the end of the day, the artwork that's created, the songs that are sung, the foods that cook, the children running through the streets, it's all about love, and we want you to experience that love here at ADAMA. I want to give a big shout out to the curatorial team for this exhibition, including Dr. Renée Alexander Craft, Tosha Grantham, yes, and
Dr. Fahamu Pecou.
and oh yeah, me too. Also, the beautiful thing is you can take a little bit of love home with you. We have catalogs for this exhibition that are for sale here in the museum that have been written and edited, collected and created and done all the things with Renee and Cheryl Odeleye. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. This catalog features, work that's in the exhibition, but there's also a beautiful essay by Opal Moore, who also is one of the Panamaniacs, as we like to call him. And so our next ADAMA Arts Salon is September 21st. We hope you will come back and join us again for another really great conversation. The hours for the exhibition, as you know, are Thursday through Saturday, 12 to 5, or by appointment Tuesday and Wednesday. So please let us know if you want to come through and bring all your friends. We'd love to see you. The exhibition will be open for another half hour or so. So if you have not had a chance to see it, please take some time to come through. Make sure I'm not forgetting anything. You look like you want to say something.
Yeah, we'll finish one.
Go ahead.
The one thing I meant to mention earlier is that a decision I had to make was I went back to a book called A Choice of Weapons. Okay. And I could have been angry. And that was my initial thought. I was going to fly home and I'm going to be a badass Panamanian. I'm going to fight the gringos, right? I'd have been dead within 30 seconds. But I decided that, a choice of weapons, as opposed to going with hatred and anger, look for some positive ways to make things grow. And so I'm happy, that I'm able to sit here with you guys and I'm not dead, because had that happened, I would not have met you, et cetera, et cetera, So it's like, making those decisions, a choice of weapons is important. And I'll just leave that as the last piece.
Well, and there you have it. Thank you all for coming out. We'll see you next time.